Welcome back, fellow goblins. My name's Lila. This is Orochi, the ivory Burmese python, and today I'm going to be talking about if it is or isn't ethical to keep giant snakes. First of all, for those who follow me here on YouTube, I sincerely apologize for my lack of uploading this past year. I have actually been working on graduating college, and I did. I graduated college. I got my bachelor's of science in biology and ecology. It was a lot of work, but I am extremely proud of myself for that accomplishment. So I was really busy. A big part of my last year of school was finishing up a huge research project regarding coyotes here in North Carolina. So yeah, I have my bachelor's now, so I'm really excited about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is I want to define what I mean by giant snakes. So there are several large species of snakes. Obviously, Orochi here is a big girl. She is a female ivory Burmese python. She will get bigger than this. Oh, let me see if I can show you her little anchor point. She will get bigger than this. She is only 8 years old. I've had her for 5 years now. 5 years now, gosh, my voice cracked a little bit there. I've had her for 5 years now, and she is one of my absolute favorite animals to work with. It's not even close. She is the showstopper when I do educational events. The second thing I want to talk about before I get started is the term ethics here. When I say if something is or isn't ethical, what we need to understand is that ethics in science is really important, but it is highly subjective, right? There is no scientific definition of what is and isn't ethical because ethics is purely based upon the individual. What I find ethical, you might not find ethical. I also sincerely apologize for the barking in the background. My dog is outside because I have Orochi out. When I have Orochi out, I put my dog outside. I have my cats in the bedroom locked up. Just because when you're handling a giant snake, I have to focus on her and handling her and making sure that she's comfortable and making sure that I'm safe. And I can't do that if I have my 4 cats running around or my pooch running around. Look, he's gone now. But you know, he was a little bit pouty. So I do apologize if you hear him yapping in the backyard. Back to what I was saying about ethics. Ethics is highly subjective. You know, what I find ethical, you might not find ethical. It is inherently subjective. There is no right or wrong answer. But ethics, when I said that there's no scientific definition for what is and isn't ethical, ethics should still be based in science, which means that our ethics as reptile keepers should be consistently evolving as we get new information that comes out, which in the herpetology field, new information is coming out constantly. Unfortunately, despite the fact that new information is coming out constantly, there are a lot of reptile keepers who insist that the way they keep is fine, even though it's what they learned in like the 80s and 90s. And their mindset is that, well, because I've been doing this for so many years and it's worked or nothing absolutely horrible has happened, that must mean it's okay. And that's just not true. It is on us as reptile keepers to stay up to date with what comes out in regards to how to keep our critters comfortable and happy and living enriching lives versus, you know, because surviving and thriving are two different things. But like I said, unfortunately, some people just don't care about that. They care about, well, I've been doing this since the 90s this way, so it doesn't matter that we have all this new data. And I do unfortunately feel like that is the mindset of a lot of giant snake keepers. Getting down to the question of, do I think that keeping giant snakes is ethical? I do and I don't. I do and I don't. I know that that's not a solid answer, but I do think it's very species dependent and it's very keeper dependent, right? I think the vast majority of people out there in the reptile keeping community cannot properly keep Burmese reticulated pythons or anacondas. I feel like that's just non-debatable because I see it all the time. The vast majority of particularly reticulated python keepers that I see keep them in far too small enclosures. There is a very, very bad misconception out there that Burmese and reticulated pythons do fine in like an 8-foot enclosure. That is not even remotely close to good enough for either of these species. And God forbid you're keeping a green anaconda, which is, green anacondas are semi-aquatic. They live in the water. They need a giant water feature. They need a ton of land and a ton of water. So it is very, very, very difficult to keep these snakes properly, and so most people don't. Reticulated pythons in particular, they are the largest snake species in the world by length. Reticulated pythons are highly, highly active snakes, and they are semi-arboreal. They spend a lot of time up high. I had a Bali yellowhead reticulated python, and he was constantly utilizing his little branches and his trees, and he was always climbing. And that is anecdotal, of course. That's just my experience with my reticulated python. But when you observe reticulated pythons in the wild, the actual, what's right in front of us with wild reticulated pythons, the actual facts prove that these are semi-arboreal snakes. They spend a lot of time in the trees, particularly when they're younger. They hunt birds a lot, and they will hunt from the trees. So it is extremely important to provide them with a ton of height, in addition to a ton of overall floor space. We're talking they're gonna need 15 plus feet. And a big issue, I'd say the overall issue with keeping giant snakes is that they are very, very accessible. It is very easy to get a giant snake. It is very easy to get, assuming you're in a place where they're legal, Burmese pythons. It's very easy to get reticulated pythons. Anacondas are definitely gonna be a lot more difficult to get. I personally have a yellow anaconda that I got from a friend. He's over there, you guys can't see him, but they are very easy to get. At pretty much every expo you'll see reticulated pythons. They are increasingly popular, unfortunately, as well, as a lot of people think I'll just get a dwarf or a super dwarf, not understanding that those are still very large snakes, and God forbid they get a mainland, because unfortunately I think one of the biggest issues with keeping large snakes is that a lot of these people who breed them are focused on selling rather than making sure that the people that these snakes go to know what they're doing and are going to be able to provide them with adequate space. And more often than not, the people who are breeding them are not providing them with adequate space. Now, again, circling back to ethics, do I personally think that we should be breeding mainland reticulated pythons? No, I don't. I actually don't. I think outside of research purposes and conservation purposes, we should not be breeding mainland reticulated pythons, because I absolutely do not think that the vast majority of people are going to be able to keep them properly. Does that mean that nobody can keep them properly? No, it does not. Of course, I'm sure that there are people out there that can keep them properly, but the vast majority of people should not have access to being able to keep these snakes. And when I say these, I am talking about reticulated pythons. I'll get into Burmese pythons here in a sec. I hope it's not too distracting that Orochi treats me like a warm tree. Now moving on to Burmese pythons. Do I think the general public should have access to Burmese pythons? Also no. Do I think we should be breeding Burmese pythons? Also no. I don't think that the vast majority of people, like I said, can properly keep Burmese pythons. And I know that might sound hypocritical, because here I am with my big female Burmese. She is in a 12-foot enclosure. That was very, very expensive to build. Additionally, my male is in a 12 by 3 by 4 foot enclosure, which is to date, by far, it's not even close, my most expensive enclosure. I'll show what the enclosures look like for both of these animals. They require a ton of space. Now, moving on from that, all three of these, anacondas, Burmese pythons, reticulated pythons, require extremely large prey, which the vast majority of people are not going to be able to get. I get my prey for these guys from local farmers, because I live in the boondocks. Most people don't have that. This is editing, Lila. I feel like I didn't iterate this well enough, so I'm gonna reiterate it here. I'm not saying nobody can keep them. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that I don't think that we should breed them, because I think that a lot of the people who are breeding them for the explicit purpose of selling them,
and most people are unable to keep them properly. Even my 12-foot enclosures will have to be bigger at some point, and that's for Burmese pythons, who are, in my experience, less active than reticulated pythons, and reticulated pythons need massive space as well, that most people just aren't going to be able to provide that. And when these animals are being sold, again, they're being sold with the express purpose of making sales, and they're being bred to make more colors. I also think that the wild type, and this is my opinion, the wild type of both Burmese pythons and reticulated pythons are gorgeous in and of themselves, but they're being bred for specific colorations for the express purpose of being sold for money, and that is what's really hurting these animals ultimately. I hope that makes sense. I say this in the end, but I'm not saying that we should ban breeding them. That's never what I'm suggesting, ever.
In conclusion, I don't think that these guys should be bred to be pets. I'm not saying that there should be legislation to prevent it. That's not what I'm saying at all. Totally different. But yeah, these guys are amazing animals, and we got to keep them right.